Hi there. This tape is an amateur production. It does not pretend to resemble a network show. Its intent is to provide an example of a tape made to record the background and techniques of experts in the field of African violets. The hope is that individuals will undertake to videotape experts who reside in their immediate area. The tape should provide some guidelines on the type of information to elicit from the local expert. It should also give some confidence to the person or affiliate who undertakes this project so that they can produce a tape as good or better than this example. It's a pleasure today to speak with Anne and Frank Tinari, who are longtime experts in the field of African violets. They've been active in the African Violet Society of America and are leading hybridizers of the beautiful plants. And before I ramble on with introductions, let me turn now first of all to you, Anne, and ask, how exactly did you get involved with African violets?
Well, it is a long story. When we were first married, I was given 2 or 3 African violets, and I couldn't grow them for anything. There was no way. Each one would die. The leaves would absolutely fade away, and I couldn't know exactly what to do. I didn't know anything about it. No one else seemed to know anything about it. And then suddenly, for some reason, I was taken ill and had to go to the hospital for a few days. And lo and behold, when I came home, the violets were in full bloom in just a week's time. And it seems that the shades had been left up. More light has gotten to the violets. And somehow they weren't overwatered, which I had been doing. And suddenly I saw a spark where I could grow African violets. And from that, I took all that into consideration. And thereafter, I left my shades up. I gave them sufficient light without burning them. But this all happened without my almost knowing it, because nature had taken over and given the plants the things that they needed most. Overwatering is the most.
When was that?
Oh, that was back in 1934, long time ago.
Yeah.
And violets were not known at all. If you went to a florist to get an African violet, he knew nothing about them. And if you went to get a violet, you usually came home with a good crop of mealybug on the violets. No one knew how to control mealybug in those days. It was just a different era entirely. But we were so infatuated with those beautiful little florets that came out that I decided right then and there I was going to grow African violets, and I grew them from that time on.
How did you get raped into this, Frank?
Of course, you know, I'm a plant person. I grew outside plants, alpine plants, perennials. We had over 1,000 varieties. And this was tough for me to kind of ease off on those to go to the violets. But after, when the war ended, I realized that there was going to be a demand for the beauty. And then realized that there wasn't any varieties around. And this started the quest for varieties which did not exist. And for a little while there, it was a nip and tuck whether I should stay in the perennial line or go into the growing African violets. And then, much to my amazement, I wanted to go. There was demand for them. There was no greenhouse. You couldn't buy anything after the war. So it meant going around looking for greenhouses. And eventually we found some, and we were able to move them and rebuild them. And this was just the very beginning.
Was that the present location, or was that a different location? So
well,
you've been here all the time?
Yes.
Since when?
40, 45, or 34. We were here from 40 on, 1940 on. We started the business after 1940, after the war, immediately after the war.
Uh-huh.
But we got a shock. We went to Lord & Burnham Company, who built the greenhouse in New York. And it says, well, it's going to be 5 to 10 years before I can get you a greenhouse. And then, like I said, the quest to look for greenhouses. I found some, very small ones, like 15 by 35. I got 2 of those. I moved them to the state, and then later on I was able to get a bigger one, 35 by 100. I got a couple of those. And the ones behind me here is a show house. I was able to move this from the state. And this made a beautiful display area here for us. And we're doing very well here. We sold a lot of violets. We originated a lot of violets. Mm-hmm. And Anna's been a big help.
Well, now, Did you get interested in the national organization
Immediately.
at the same time?
Immediately.
Just starting up at that time, believe it or not. What year was that, Anna, that you went to...
1947, I believe that was in 1947. We had read that there was going to be a convention, and all we could talk about was going to this convention. We got to know people in the area, some people from New York, some people from Washington, who were also interested. And correspondence began. And then I began to write to people in Georgia. Mrs. Crow, who was one of the originators of the society. And we found out a lot of different things, urging us to go down, make sure we go down to this. It wasn't a convention, it was just a get-together in the first.
You say we, you both went down together?
No, we had one child at the time, and one of us had to stay home. And of course, Frank was busy with his perennial business, and he felt I had to leave my little girl and go down. And it was a very trying time for me. I had never left home for that long. We went down to Georgia, and we stayed there for a whole week. We were at the hotel down there, and a lot of friends from this area who were interested in African violets. And it just formed a nucleus of people that wanted to grow African violets. There was no other way. And we went to all the greenhouses we could that were down there. Like I said, Mr. Starr, and also the one in Georgia, the other one that was down there, do you remember her name? Mrs. Brown. They had a large greenhouse. We were so amazed because we were so careful with the violets. We didn't have a greenhouse at the time, but we were growing violets in our home, on the windows, very carefully. Here they had them on the ground, more or less, because the temperature down there is so different. And here, when we started to build greenhouses, we had to think about heating more than anything, because this is a hot crop. It's not like growing carnations or anything, but there they grew African violets like 6 inches above the ground, and just on trays and benches. That was so entirely different than we had any thought of growing violets. Well, but it was an eye-opener.
You mentioned in one of the publications that there was a profusion of African violets in that first show. Where did all those violets come from?
They mostly came from Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Crow, all the ones that were really interested in violets. Mr. Starr, who had beautiful violets, they came in tubs, and they weren't groomed or anything. They were in full blossom, but they were hanging out of the pots, but they were violets. They were blooming. And for that early in this wonderful experience that we've had, we were amazed to see so many varieties and so many different pots. But it was nothing like the shows we have today. But they set them up in a very beautiful way, that they all were shown, and people admired them. They didn't have to be in special pots or anything. They just bought them in clay pots as they were.
There was a different set of standards, too, wasn't there?
Different entirely. There were no stands at the time.
The varieties were nothing.
Right. The standards really started when Ruth Carey wrote her first book, and from that we started to have standard shows.
Well, now, what about the national organization, the African Violet Society of America? How did you get involved? You've done some writing and so on?
Well, there was a lot of correspondence going on, and in fact, the first magazine that came out, I was so upset because our ad wasn't in it, and I quickly wrote to Alma Wright, the editor, and said, "How dare you have a magazine without our ad in it?" Our ad appeared in every magazine since, and that's been many, many years. But at first there was just 3 or 4 pages to the magazine. But it was so interesting. The most interesting part is names were entirely different. And the minute I got down there, Dr. Holly put me on the nomenclature association, where we would start to get names. At that time, there was someone in the society who was a good artist, and we sent cards around showing the different varieties and the colors and the description and everything. Because, for instance, we had a little variety up here that was sort of lavender in color called Trilby. And there they called it Mary Whack. It was the same variety, but right away we understood there had to be a registration, and there had to be a finalization of what varieties, what the true name of the different varieties. And from that, I think people got very aware of varieties, and we started to have different ones. Then hybridizing started. Our first hybrid was America, that beautiful, beautiful pale blue DuPont type foliage, very thick. And from that, hybridizing what was at its height at that time. Everybody was crossing. They didn't know what they were, none of us knew what we were doing in the beginning, but we certainly found out quickly. And many new varieties began to come out. And from then on, I mean, registration was the most important thing, to register a variety and have a distinct name for it and so forth.
Well, now, then, Frank, you got into the business of insects and so on. How did this come about?
My job, I could see, well, being a flower grower all my life, I saw the value of this plant because it blooms year-round. Not many plants field do this. And this is what triggered. I figured, if I'm going to make it and make something out of it, physically and financially, these are the gems that I could see in front of me. Even though at the time they weren't very much as far as color-wise. But I realized by crossbreeding, having some idea of the genetic field, doing the work for outdoor stuff, delphinium and things like that, columbine, I could, so if I could just change their mind a little bit, maybe I could accomplish something, and this turned out. Of course, now we have the beautiful variety, which you can use in many ways, but you can sell them year-round rather than once a year, and this was the value. Again, the job was to be able, after the war, to get facilities to grow these. The material did not exist, and you couldn't buy lumber or cement blocks, greenhouse, glass, or anything. Just remember, everything went for the war till the war ended. So by 1950, we had pretty good shape. I had 4 or 5 greenhouses up, and we had the production, and we were getting little newer varieties. And then not to my amazement, but I realized I could sell them because a lot of people liked them. But we had a local flower show, Philadelphia Flower Show, which at that time was attended by 100,000 people. And I figured if I could ever get in there and display these things, then we'd have some fun to really find out if the people really wanted them. We had no idea that people would buy them in quantities. But we had the good fortune of being able to get a space in the flower show, and also I participated in the New York Flower Show in the Coliseum, Center City, New York. And of course there I had a nice exhibit, and they just stole everything off the display thing. I realized the value was there.
It was amazing because new varieties began to come out, and there was a variety called Redhead. At that time, we weren't selling. We just put out displays just for people to see African violets.
Philadelphia Flower Show.
Yes, at the Philadelphia Flower Show. And someone quickly came to our booth. We both used to attend, and someone came and said, someone stole your redhead. And Frank turned around and he says, well, we don't have any redheads in our family. He says, we're all brunettes. He says, no, she says, I mean a plan. She says, look at your exhibit. Somebody stole it. Here somebody had gone and they couldn't buy them. There was nobody there to sell them.
It was a display table. It was a display table.
The production wasn't up at that time, and someone had just gone and taken the violet and on with them. It was amazing. One year at the same flower show, we exhibited one called the Pink Supreme. It was so...
Pink Dresden?
No, it wasn't Pink Dresden. It was before Pink Dresden. It was a real bright pink.
Oh, yeah, a little pink on that.
And Mrs. DuPont, who was a friend of ours, who helped us get into the DuPont varieties and everything, came along and she said, Anne, I have to have that violet. And we says, well, we're not allowed to take it off of there. And she says, well, at any price, she says, I have to have that violet. She says, different than all the beautiful DuPont cultivars that she was raising. And we said, we're very, very sorry, and we hope this isn't the end of our friendship, but there is a rule here in Philadelphia that you can't take anything off the exhibit until it's done. And she went away very unhappy, but we later shipped her a plant. It was the real first deep pink Supreme type. And fortunately, we developed the first pink that wasn't patented. Remember, the pink and the white, they were so popular and really...
Pink luster.
Pink luster.
Pink luster.
It was called Pink Luster,
remember,
but it was the first one that wasn't patented.
Couple of the early varieties were patent. That was another problem, you see. The first pink one and the white one was patent.
You weren't allowed to grow plants from it.
So through crossing, we're able to break that down, you see, to develop our own varieties. See, again, we were thinking about commercially trying to make a living, and then we realized the demand was there. If we could in some way get it to them at the right
production, then we had to have production.
What have you. And plants unknown, people didn't know how to grow them, they didn't know how to treat them.
If they couldn't buy them, they would steal them. But we soon got over that because production began quickly.
Now, thinking of it back, though, to earlier times with the African Violet Society, you got involved with, Anne, you got involved with writing quite a bit for the magazine. Frank, from all the records, you were involved in some of the research grants.
Yes, yes.
How about telling me a little bit about those? What did you see in those days?
At the very beginning, you must remember, there was 2 or 3 people in society who started society. And we had, what are you going to do with them? We got to find out how to grow them. And they broke down with disease, with nematodes, which is a root problem. And there was Henry Peterson was one of them, Charlie Fisher, myself. There was several of us. So we thought we better start it. And I was asked to participate and find out what we could do with these nematodes. They're destroying every plant that came along. So we were able to go to Rutgers University, and Dr. Strude did some work on the nematodes. This is root nematodes. It's the same one that destroyed the potato crop in Ireland way back in history. Perhaps some of you might be of our own Irish descent. And this is what happened. But we were able to find out what was going on, and we could do that by sterilizing the soil. Eliminate them before they were potted, see, and worked out. And of course, as you probably, by the time that has passed, I was a research chair for a long, long time. Oh, many.
This was a grant from the society.
That's
right?
correct. And every nickel was used for that purpose and nothing else.
Well, he was research chairman, and he was able to write to these different professors that we knew. We got very involved with people at Penn State University and the different universities in our area that he was able to, Dr. Craig was able to come down here and look at our crop and understand the problems that we were having. In fact, one grant they had a whole greenhouse at Penn State University working on trying to get new varieties. And one time, I said to him one day, we went up to look at all the ones they had hybridized and did a lot of work with the students had done. And I said, I'm a little disappointed. I don't see anything brand new. We were looking for a break in color, something entirely different. And he says, well, I'll tell you. And he said, I really don't know how you ever got the varieties that you do have. And through hybridizing and through mutation, violets do mutate, we had gained so many varieties that they weren't really they didn't come up with anything entirely new as far as color break.
Remember, we have very few species. Not more than a half a dozen or so. And comparing this with the orchid, which have 3,000 or more. So we've come a long ways.
I'll say.
I mean, fig was limited. And of course, even now, I'm looking for colors that God knows where, but somewhere there must be other colors. I know I worked very hard on coral, which is a coral color, the reddish.
Are you still doing some hybridizing?
You still do some, yes.
I kind of, for some reason, I got the impression that you were kind of backing off of.
We don't do as much because we get so busy with.
Right now, people want the beauty, as you're seeing here. Mm-hmm. The collectors, they can do their own crossing, rather than it's a long time process. Mm-hmm. By the time you cross, you get the pollen, you get the seed. You cross, you get the pollen, you get the seed. Plant the seed, you flower the flower, and then you select the plant, the color you want, and then you grow. Well, it's about 3 years involved. Commercial people can't tie up a greenhouse that long a time. Of course, the fuel, you kill them. But the amateur can still do it, and they should do it, and they can have fun doing it.
That's what we sort of heard about the yellow, that there was a slowdown on people because commercially they couldn't involve all that time.
Yeah, the yellow hasn't amounted to anything yet. Now, there could be in the future. We don't know. We don't know what's behind these. We know we've come a long ways. But again, we go back, what does the public want? What color will they purchase to make it worthwhile to growers to grow the plants? We always come back to the dollar value, of anything.
How does the demand stand now as opposed to early in the game?
Demand is very high.
Keeps on building up?
It's very high, but it's not as much on the collector's end of it.
It has changed entirely.
But the commercial end of it, in other words, the usage of the plant is up, which is what we want.
You're speaking more of individuals wanting to have any number of plants.
That's right.
Just to enjoy.
Yeah, they can go to shows and see a beautiful plant, but they always want a new one, a better one, which is right. But this takes a lot of time, and a lot of work, and a lot of expense. But there's no end to plant what's going to happen. What colors may come in the future, we don't know. But there's possibilities.
All right, speaking of future, what do you see as the future? Is there going to be a vast change?
A lot of things. We could have fragrance in them. We could have bigger flowers, more of them, more beautiful colors.
Well, Anne, you were talking about a new method of handling violets, some sort of a basket affair, I think.
Well, we have found it's very expensive to run a greenhouse. I don't know how much oil you use in a year. It comes in by the tankers.
30,000.
Here in the north, we have a great time keeping up with expenses between that and insecticides that we have to use and all the different things. That to wait for the little person that wants for their collection, you'd never make it. And we have found to have a bigger distribution of having plants used, African violets used every day. Like we do a lot of baskets. This has been a great year for us as far as wedding baskets. Instead of paying $50 for a table arrangement, for a $25 basket, they would get something like this.
Why don't you just pick that up and bring it around in front of you, Anne,
you
so
see,
we can see it.
there are 6 violets in here, and what they do is to they put this in the center of the table, which makes everybody happy, and then when the occasion is over, they take these violets out. Each one is in their own little packet like that, and they give them to the guests, and that makes a big hit. And one person tells another, another person tells another, and violets in general are the type of plant that people use for remembrance. They go home from a wedding, or they go home from a bar mitzvah, or a 16-year party, or something like that, and they have this violet, and they nurture it. They think, I got this at a certain place, and I'm going to keep it. And that's the way we build it up, from people just stopping in every day, because we have 3 big hospitals near us, just to come in and get a plant quickly that's nicely wrapped. We put it in a real fancy bag for them, and they go off with it, and they have a gift that lasts forever. They have it in the hospital, they go home, and they keep it, because it's a remembrance. It's a kind of a thing. And we've just worked it up that now, almost every day, we get orders where people want baskets like this for different occasions. We do baskets for 50th anniversary, 25th anniversary. We've even done baskets for funerals, believe it or not. There are people that are crazy about African violets. I had the strangest call the other day. A woman called me and she said, I have a very bad problem with my African violets. And I said, well, how did you get to know me? And she says, well, the Pennsylvania Horticulture Society said to call you. You would know what to do about it. And I said, what's the problem? She said, I'm making a will, and I have 20 plants I want to leave to someone who will take care of them and keep on growing with them. That was the strangest call I ever had. Right away I told her about the National Society, but she lived in Philadelphia. I said, well, that's too far for you to send them down there. But I told her about the local club in Philadelphia, and I said they would probably be glad to have them. On with that, she got very friendly and asked me how to grow more violets more diligently than she was growing, and we had a great conversation. But I thought to myself, people think that much about their African violets, almost like a person. She was going to leave them to somebody who won. She was more worried about the African violets than all the possessions that she owned, that she had. So this is the way we have built up this, and we do baskets for almost every occasion you can think of. Then people have parties, like showers for a bridal or something like that, and they take individual plants and put them at each place. It's amazing how it works up, and it's mostly by mouth. One person tells another person, and if you like African violets, something that will last. If they have,
even in the city the size of Philadelphia,
amazing.
you
It's
still
just
get
amazing.
the word of mouth.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once they come here and they say, well, if you want violets for your party, call Tinari's. And we've given so much attention to that we don't have time for a lot of the hybridizing things we used to do. We used to go out when we were younger. We used to go out almost every night to talk to clubs. We can't do that anymore. But we have clubs come here. It's amazing how many clubs come, and we We lecture them for about an hour. They go through the greenhouses and they tell us their experiences. We have them ask questions. We have many little groups.
Well, let me ask this question and sort of butt in here. This tape is going to be seen by an awful lot of the affiliate African Violet Society clubs. Thinking in terms of those people, do you have some sort of a message you might like to leave with them?
All I can say is people who grow African violets, to me, are very happy people. They're very interesting people. If you grow African violets, you always have something to share with somebody else. You can always take a leaf cutting or whatever and start another plant. But they're so decorative, and they fill up almost any purpose you could possibly want, and they're very easy to grow. There was a time people didn't know how to grow them. Today, our National Society puts out all kinds of information. If you subscribe to the African Violet magazine, there's enormous amount of information in there, from exactly how to do it, not in fancy language, but exactly how to do it, and many illustrations showing you how to do it. So it's one of the easiest plants to grow. I certainly encourage you to grow it.
And Frank, how about you give us a few words of wisdom?
Yeah, I'd like to get 2 or 3. I think Anne pretty well covered the subject pretty well. But you must remember, this is a beautiful plant, and it's an inexpensive plant. Now, what I mean saying, you can grow, if you can't afford $2 or $3 for a plant, you can grow one from a leaf cutting. So it's an everyday plant for everyday people. What Anne forgot way back there, her and I got involved with the TV Garden Club programs, and we're on there about 15 years, and we used to have a lot of fun from showing people from cutting, the step-ups, how to root one to flowering stage. And sometimes we used to get like a couple thousand inquiries. So we're opening a door to beauty and to people, fascinating people who are shut-ins, especially. I worry about people who never get out of the house, and yet they can grow these on a windowsill. You can take New York apartments, you can take L.A. and San Francisco. Imagine those big apartment houses, and people never get on the street. And yet, here are little beauties, they can grow on a windowsill and pick whatever choice they like to do. And at the end, they're an inexpensive plant, and I think it should be enjoyed by everyone as much as you possibly can. You never have enough beauty. A lot of people say, what do you do with all your plants? I say, well, I try to sell some of them, and most of them we can sell, and some we enjoy and look at them ourselves. But that's not the case. We move a lot of plants out. We grow a lot of plants. Anne has been very good in making these baskets. So there's always a new gimmick. Christmas time, we have fun putting violets and poinsettia together. It's another combination of things that we do. The seasons. We have orchids now, phalaenopsis, which go well Christmas time and all during the year. So, and we have also a very excellent neighborhood. We're near Philadelphia. We're only 15 miles north of Philadelphia. But we're surrounded with suburban sprawl, which is great wealth, and people have beautiful homes and nice windows, especially a west window where the plants do well. That's the one. People must remember, they're filled with light. They must have their semi-shade plant. And you should turn them around a little bit and feed them, and don't put them into a big pot, and don't be so generous that you rot them by overwatering them. I don't know what else I can tell you. All I know, my curiosity got the best of me as I way back in the history there. And I thought, man, if I could just change your colors a little bit, maybe I could make a little fortune out of it. It's been lucky. I've been very lucky with them. I've enjoyed working with them.
Let that be the final word. And may I just say that we've been talking to Anne and Frank Tinari, Tinari's Greenhouses, and long-time AVSA members, and certainly a pair of people who are leading lights in the field of African violets. Thanks again, folks.
You're welcome.
Pleasure to help you.